Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. In Doha, the Afghan government and the Taliban have reached a preliminary deal to press on with peace talks. This is their first written agreement in 19 years of war. The deal is being considered a major breakthrough as it would allow negotiators to move on to more substantive issues, including talks on a ceasefire. Britain has approved the world's first COVID-19 vaccine by Pfizer-BioNTech for rollout from next week. The U.S. says it has made preparations to enable the immediate mass shipment of vaccines. Meanwhile, from 5 Chinese vaccine candidates, 4 have reached phase 3 of clinical trials before seeking regulatory approval. Pakistan has already approved funds to buy a vaccine against COVID-19, which has claimed over 8,100 lives in the country. The global death toll by the new coronavirus has exceeded 1.48 million, with over 63.8 million infections. The UN has signed a deal with the Ethiopian government to allow unimpeded humanitarian access to the embattled Tigray region. This will allow aid to reach the region, which has been cut off during fighting that began a month ago between federal troops and Tigray rebels. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced to establish the first special economic zone in Gilgit-Baltistan. Addressing the oath-taking ceremony of GB cabinet, Khan says work is underway to grant provincial status to the region. The Prime Minister has also announced a complete health coverage for the people of Gilgit-Baltistan. And in football, Liverpool have qualified for the knockout stage of the Champions League after beating Ajax 1-0 at home. Curtis Jones scored his first goal of the league at Anfield to give a crucial victory to his team in the Group D clash. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. In Doha, the Afghan government and the Taliban have reached a preliminary deal to press on with peace talks. This is their first written agreement in 19 years of war. This agreement lays out the way forward for further discussions, but is considered a breakthrough as it will allow negotiators to move on to more substantive issues, including talks on a ceasefire. A statement by a member of the Afghan negotiating team says the preamble of talks has been finalized. The Taliban spokesman confirms the same on Twitter. Now, Britain has approved the world's first COVID-19 vaccine by Pfizer BioNTech for rollout from next week. The U.S. says it has made preparations to enable the immediate mass shipment of vaccines. Meanwhile, from 5 Chinese vaccine candidates, 4 have reached phase 3 of clinical trials before seeking regulatory approval. Global death toll by the new coronavirus has exceeded 1.48 million, with over 63.8 million infections. More in the following report.
With critical breakthroughs in COVID-19 vaccine developments, countries have started preparing for immunization drives. Brazil has decided to vaccinate its indigenous people and health workers first, as the country recorded 697 fatalities overnight. The nationwide death toll has crossed 173,000, while in the United States, an advisory panel of the Centers for Disease Control has recommended that nursing homes and health workers be immunized first. Hospitals across the country have started making necessary arrangements for vaccine deployment.
So we are very fortunate at the Jackson Health System. We are expecting the COVID-19 vaccine. We have the negative 80 refrigeration freezer needed to store the vaccine. We are expecting the vaccine in mid-December. So we are ready to make sure that we are deploying the vaccine to our employees.
Meanwhile, the European Union has also given a clear time frame to its members for the start of their vaccination programs. Germany is preparing vaccination centers across the country for the launch of its immunization drive in the first quarter of 2021. And in Asia, India's coronavirus death toll has surged to over 138,000, with more than 9.4 million cases. November proved to be the deadliest month for the Indian capital, New Delhi, with over 100 daily fatalities. But New Delhi says not everyone will need to be vaccinated.
Our purpose is to break the chain of virus transmission. So if we are able to vaccinate a critical mass of people and break that virus transmission, then we may not have to vaccinate the entire population.
Japan has approved a bill to provide vaccination free of charge, with its majority elderly population extremely vulnerable to the virus.
Now, Pakistan has recorded 75 more deaths from COVID-19, pushing the toll to 8,166. This is the country's highest death toll since July. More details in the following report.
The health ministry says 2,829 infections were reported overnight. The country has recorded 403,000 infections so far, out of which more than 345,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Imran Khan has called for national collective efforts to fight the second wave. Presiding over a meeting of the federal cabinet, the Prime Minister asked for timely purchase of coronavirus vaccine. The cabinet has approved a $150 million grant to procure vaccines, with healthcare workers and the elderly a priority.
Now, Pakistan has called for emergency financing for coronavirus-hit developing countries to avoid economic collapse. President and Pakistan's envoy to UN Munir Akram said this at the 25th anniversary of the World Summit on Social Development. He said no one can be safe until coronavirus is defeated globally. Akram called on the UN to ensure everyone has access to a COVID vaccine. He said unless the poorer countries are helped to revive economic growth, the world will be unable to overcome the triple challenge it confronts: the virus, the recession, and climate change. The ECO-SOC chief also urged for making the world's financial, trade, and technology regimes fairer. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced to establish the first special economic zone in Gilgit-Baltistan. Khan says government will focus on promoting tourism in the region. Addressing the oath-taking ceremony of GB Cabinet, PM Khan said work is underway to grant provisional provincial status to the region. The Prime Minister also announced a complete health coverage for the people of Gilgit-Baltistan. Khan says 1 million rupees will be allocated for each household for availing medical treatment at any hospital. He says the government will also develop skiing areas in the region to promote tourism. Moving on, Ethiopia and the UN have reached an agreement to allow aid into government-held areas of the restive Tigray region. UN spokesman Saviano Ebru says an assessment mission will begin later today. The agreement will allow food, medicines, and other aid into the region that has seen rising hunger during the conflict. This comes a month after deadly conflict cut off the region from the rest of the world, where federal troops declared victory against local forces last week. But the rebels remain defiant, saying the war is not over yet. And U.S. President Donald Trump's campaign has filed a petition challenging Wisconsin's presidential vote results. The swing state certified President-elect Joe Biden as the winner after a recount in 2 counties. The petition was filed as Attorney General William Barr discredited Trump's claims of mass electoral fraud in the election. Barr says the Justice Department has found no evidence of fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. The Trump campaign has said the Justice Department did not conduct a thorough enough investigation. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden marches towards presidential transition, forging his administration. Unveiling his team of economic advisors, Biden named former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen as U.S. Treasury Secretary. And moving on, Saudi Arabia has criticized Iran for implicating Riyadh in the killing of top Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs said Iran is desperate to blame Riyadh for anything negative that happens in Tehran. In a tweet, Adil Al-Jubair said engaging in assassinations is not the policy of Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's representative to UN condemned the killing of Fakhrizadeh as a loss of the entire Muslim world. He urged Iran not to escalate the situation, as emotional and spontaneous reactions will not bring positive outcomes. And the UN says a 2-state solution is the only premise for a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace between Israelis and Palestinians. UN General Assembly President Volkan Bozkır was addressing the Legislative Committee on the Rights of Palestinians. He criticized Israel's attempts to erode the status of Jerusalem, threats of annexation, and the inhumane blockade in Gaza. He said these recurring activities severely curtail the fundamental rights and freedoms of the Palestinians. Bozkır asserted that the rights of Palestinians are not up for negotiation. He said only constructive negotiations between the parties and adherence to UN resolutions will bring about a durable solution. And also in Israel, Benny Gantz, the chief governing partner of PM Benjamin Netanyahu, says his party will back an opposition bill to dissolve the parliament. The move can force a 4th election in Israel in under 2 years. In an address, Gantz said Netanyahu's refusal to support a budget proposal shows he wants to take Israel back to the polls. Gantz said the only person who can prevent these elections is Netanyahu, as he is responsible for the present situation. Shortly before Gantz spoke, Netanyahu released a video on Twitter in which he urged Gantz to vote against the measure. Netanyahu said now is not the time for elections, but unity. And the U.S. and Turkey take aim at each other during a virtual meeting of NATO foreign ministers. The outgoing U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, accused Turkey of aggravating tensions in the Mediterranean. Pompeo said Ankara gave a gift to the Kremlin by purchasing Russian anti-aircraft missile system. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu fired back at Pompeo, accusing him of urging European allies to forge an alliance against Turkey. Ankara's top diplomat said Washington was blind finally siding with Athens, escalating regional tensions. Cavusoglu also accused the U.S. of backing Kurdish terrorist organizations in Syria. The meeting was primarily intended to focus on a new report on how NATO should adapt for the next decade. Now, Japan has slammed Russia's deployment of its S-300 missile defense systems on a chain of disputed islands. Cabinet Secretary Katsunobu Kato says Tokyo has protested with Moscow. The Russians seized the islands at the end of World War II. A territorial row has prevented Japan and Russia from signing a formal peace treaty. Tokyo has repeatedly lodged similar protests against Russian military drills and internet expansion, which Moscow has rejected. And in Argentina, investigators raided the home of Diego Maradona, psychiatrist, under a judicial order. They also searched Agustina Kosachev's private office in Buenos Aires. In an interview, Kosachev's lawyer said the prosecutors were investigating a possible malpractice. Vadim Mischanchuk said these were routine measures when investigating a patient's death.
She gave her statement as a witness, and this raid forced me to turn up in order to talk to the prosecutor, and I found out she is being investigated. So we could say that if she is being investigated, that means she could be charged.
In India, talks between the centre and farmers demanding a revision of controversial farm laws ended inconclusively. The protesters and government agreed to meet again on Thursday. Mass protests continue as the deadlock on the ground persists. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government passed laws ending its mandatory procurement of produce at fixed rates. The farmers say the three laws are a death decree for farmers as they will be exploited by big corporations. Farmers have rejected the expert committee set up by the Modi government, saying such panels have never led to any outcome. We'll be back with more news after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. A rare skeleton of a saber-toothed cat is expected to fetch between 60,000 and 80,000 Swiss francs at an auction next week. The skeleton is estimated to be some 37 million years old. More in this report.
In Switzerland, centuries-old skeleton of a prehistoric predatory mammal is all set to be sold at an auction house Piguet. The fossilized skeleton discovered in the rocky badlands of South Dakota belongs to a robust animal which hunted horses and small rhinoceros.
Il y a vraiment un grand intérêt du public.
There is really huge interest from public in general for everything related to dinosaurs and prehistory. And I think it's because of the numerous films and video games that came out in recent years.
The primitive skeleton mounted on a piece of wood is prepared to be the star lot among 40 others at the auction on December 8. According to the head of Swiss-based seller, the specimen was better than others which have come in recent years.
C'est la nouveauté, c'est quelque chose qui n'existe pas depuis très longtemps, ça s'est développé.
It's new. It's something we haven't seen for a long time. It has developed over the last 5 years, maybe a little bit more. Big collectors start to drive up prices of exceptional pieces such as this kind of animal. It is universal dimension, no religion, no culture. It speaks to all of us wherever we come from. It's from before our time, and I think it's one of the rare artistic sectors which really has no borders.
The auction dedicated to paleontology is hoping to attract online bidders.
An Indonesian man is making cosplay costumes for cats. He sells them online to transform felines into superheroes, fashionistas in hijabs, or even cobblers. More in this report.
After quitting his job as a school teacher, an Indonesian entrepreneur tried his hand at a number of businesses. He finally stumbled upon one unusual occupation. Although it may not be haute couture, Freddy Lugina Priyadi found a lucrative market for cat fashion. Priyadi set up his online business 3 years ago and earns up to $210 a month if he sells at least 4 pieces a day.
My cousins who love cats gave me the idea to make these costumes, and at first I thought it was weird. Why do animals need to wear clothes? But it turned out to be funny to see them wearing costumes.
Freddie has also faced backlash on social media from people questioning if he is trying to give human qualities to animals. But he insists the costumes are just for fun and advises buyers not to make their pets wear an outfit for too long. One customer bought at least 30 different outfits for her cats and places orders for special occasions like Eid or Christmas.
It's
for fun only. Sogan has a TikTok account, and looking at pictures of cats wearing costumes like these can help to relieve our stress. And I, as the owner, can have fun with the cat. After all, my cat tends to be quiet and happy.
This sounds fun, but in the wake of a boom in social media posts of pets dressed up, some animal welfare groups have issued guidelines to try to make owners more aware of any signs it may be causing their pets distress.
And in other news, Singapore has become the first country in the world to approve sale of lab-grown meat by a U.S. startup. The country's food agency said it thoroughly reviewed manufacturing control and safety testing data before granting approval. The company Eat Just says its so-called clean meat does not come from slaughtered animals. Company co-founder and CEO Josh Tetrick said the meat will be priced at premium chicken rate. Demand for alternatives to regular meat is soaring globally due to health, animal welfare, and environment concerns. Now in Puerto Rico, a massive telescope at Arecibo Observatory that had been deteriorating since August has collapsed. The telescope aided 57 years of astronomical discoveries. The U.S. National Science Foundation says the radio telescope's 900-ton instrument platform fell yesterday. It added no injuries were reported. Two cables supporting the reflector dish had broken since August, causing damage and forcing officials to close the observatory. The telescope was one of the largest in the world. It was used to study distant planets, potentially hazardous asteroids, and potential signatures of extraterrestrial life. And in a historic first, a Chinese probe has completed the drilling, sampling, and sealing of lunar soil after successfully landing on the moon's surface. Details in this report.
China was late to the space race. It did not send its first satellite into orbit until 1970, but it has caught up fast. In a first such attempt by any country in 40 years, Beijing launched a mission to return moon samples to Earth. Now the Chang'e 5 probe is gathering samples from the moon's surface as planned. Earlier, the China National Space Administration said the Chang'e 5 probe successfully landed on the near side of the moon.
This movement is the first step. It steadily landed on the surface, very steady and very good. It lays a very important foundation for the next drilling and collecting.
The material will provide further understanding of the geological evolution of the moon. It will provide necessary information for better understanding the solar activity. Last year, the Chang'e 4 probe touched down on the far side of the moon, the first space probe from any nation to do so. This time, the probe selected the site and touched down on the north of the Mons Riumker in Oceanus Procellarum, also known as the Ocean of Storms.
Although we have done the landing twice before this mission, this time the lander is heavier than the U2 lunar rover, and so it is harder to control it with a higher requirement for its precision.
If successful, the mission will make China the third nation to have retrieved lunar samples after the US and the Soviet Union.
And now moving on to business, most European stocks have edged lower, tracking mixed sentiment in their U.S. and Asia-Pacific counterparts. The Pan-European Stock 600 slipped marginally, with autos shedding over 1%. Frankfurt's DAX and Italy's FTSE MIB have slid around 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris, too, edged down fractionally. But London's FTSE has risen following news of the UK greenlighting COVID-19 vaccine. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with mainland Chinese shares sliding, while Japanese, South Korean, Australian bourses gained. Now on to sports. Liverpool have qualified for the knockout stage of the Champions League after beating Ajax 1-0 at home. Tuesday's encounters in the Champions League were crucial in deciding the final round of 16. More in this report.
As the knockout stage approaches, the UEFA Champions League is heating up. Curtis Jones scored his first Champions League goal at Anfield to give a crucial victory to the Reds in the Group D clash. In another group match, Midtjylland drew 1-1 with Atlanta for their first point in the tournament this season. In Group B, Shakhtar Donetsk shocked Real Madrid 2-0. In the other Group B clash, Inter Milan beat Mönchengladbach 3-2 in a thoroughly entertaining encounter. Atletico Madrid could only draw 1-1 against Bayern at home, following a late penalty from Thomas Müller. FC Porto and Manchester City advanced to the next phase after the two played out a goalless draw in Group C.
And one more member of the Pakistan cricket team has tested positive for COVID-19, taking the overall tally of infections to 8. 6 of the 53-member squad had tested positive upon their arrival in New Zealand, while another case detected last week. New Zealand's health ministry says the team is not allowed to train. It will remain on hold pending consideration by health officials. The Pakistan Cricket Board says all those who return negative tests are expected to be able to train in managed isolation. The first T20 is slated for the 18th of December at Auckland, while the last test will be played at Christchurch on the 3rd of January. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.